Great. This is Fraser O'Leary. I'm the chair of the Educator Excellence Committee. It's January, it's June, no, it's not. It's July the 31st, the last day of July, 2024. And it's 4:03 p.m. and we'd like to begin the meeting. Count the Representative Henderson and I are here. And now Representative Williams is about to appear, and our person in charge is Jennifer Briones. Uh, Ben, welcome. We just are starting, and uh, I'd really like to start with what Ben brought up about in an email about his meeting with the new superintendent. Robert, have you met with her?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so I guess Ben, why don't you start with what that has to do with what we're doing
Sure. So,
as far as teachers and making them excellent.
yeah, absolutely. It's a couple things. Robert, this we were talked about this in the student engagement committee meeting. And this was in the context, a couple of different contexts. So one, like in something this committee has pursued, we still need the workforce data, right? To be able to make sure that we have annual data on teachers. Two, we wanted to talk about like the induction standards and what that could look like, and I have some ideas around that. But I think in terms of what Fraser's mentioning, and how it kind of dovetails with both the educator and student experience is um, we want to know, with the context of chronic absenteeism, like what schools are doing at the beginning of the school year to make sure that there are interventions in place if students aren't coming to school.
Okay, and that's basically what Ben's committee works on as far as student attendance and truancy. Okay, did you talk to the superintendent at all about OSSI's role in working with new teachers?
I did not.
Okay, Robert, do you want to? I'll get back to that. Robert, do you want to mention did you mention anything about what we're talking about as far as teacher retention and new teachers preparation?
I don't think so. I was mostly focused on the graduation requirements with her.
Okay, okay. I did talk to her about what OSSI can do about um, new teacher retention, all right, but not a lot. Uh, and I'm still trying to figure out what OSSI's role is with teacher retention. Um, but I think that what I would like to posit for us is that what we need is some quick data on what the retention rates were in the LEAs at, or what they are right now, or what the numbers were like at the end of school, before school starts. Do you think that's a complete non-starter as far as finding out information?
Well, we should be able to pull that from the report card, right?
Well, no, the report card, um, you're talking about the report card that came out last November?
Oh, so you want something updated?
Oh, I mean, the schools know what they should know at the beginning of school how many teachers didn't return. And I'd like to get that information in September.
I think what we're planning on getting, and I don't know if it's something worth an extra ask, but there is, um, she did mention in our meeting that OSSI will be releasing workforce data in August. So shortly, I'd say the next 2 to 3 weeks. So I think, to me, the best next steps would be to look at that, to see how recent it is, to see where there are gaps in particular areas. I imagine special educators, maybe some educational aides, some STEM fields are still going to be in high needs and demand, and then to go from there. But I don't have a new ask necessarily on that issue.
Right. Well, that educator workforce that we talked about in what, March, or I guess April at least, was data that Ossie had promised to get to us before school was out.
Exactly. It's been delayed. And so I think that is part of the challenge, but I think that um in terms of kind of knowing what our next steps as a committee, we should have more clarity on that in the coming weeks.
At least, and I pulled up what they have included previously in those data files. It includes like the counts and the demographics of the educator workforce, their preparation and performance, so which EPPs they came from, I believe, retention, and then also what they call supply and demand. So those are the kind of.
Because this is a really interesting month to be a principal. I know that we talk to principals. I still, I talk to them all summer long because I want to see if their buildings are ready, and also about their hiring and stuff like that, because I know there are still principals hiring as we speak. At least I've talked to at least a half a dozen principals in the last couple of days who still have vacancies. Um, Ben, do you know uh, of anything because that's one of our major problems that we need to be working on as a committee, I guess.
Well,
The other
yeah.
is how are the new teachers being prepared, like over this summer, from if they were a new teacher last year and they came back, what is the system doing to make them more comfortable in their second year? Because Ben and I both know, I don't know, Ben's his fabulous teacher and I was just a rookie. But I know as a rookie teacher, and I started in the middle of the year, so it was even rookier. But it was like a Osh moment for me the first semester after being a very successful student teacher and then taking over 5 classrooms from 5 different teachers. And you know which classroom they gave up. It wasn't their best class. And I had a very successful relationship with the students, but as far as getting the message across to my students, I didn't have the slightest idea what I was doing. Now I got
Right.
better as it went along, but see the problem we have now with these new teachers is they're not given that wiggle room to be successful with impact and stuff like that. It
Yeah,
cuts their legs off.
I'm glad you said that, Fraser. And so I think that there's two things that brings to mind for me. So the first is the evaluation piece, which I want to touch on next. But the first being, um, like some states have what are called induction standards, which are like standards that we should help newer teachers reach to make sure that there is um, a supportive environment and training that occurs so that we're making sure that teachers aren't leaving the classroom in their early years. Um, and so what I think this committee should think about doing and figure out is like, and Jen, this was to your point earlier, like, what does that look like? Like by the second year, the third year, the fourth year, the fifth year, what do should be, what should LEAs, what should DCS be doing to support teachers? And the good news, I think, is one, that other states already have induction standards, so we don't have to create this from scratch. And I think that's one action step that I would implore us to take, is like looking at what other like induction standards exist. I think two, standards fall within our purview directly as a statutory thing. So that's That's another added benefit. And then 3, I think the lack of transparency around where teachers are coming in would also be a part of this for me. So like, you know, most states will have particular public institutions that are training teachers, right? Like in Ohio, you have Ohio State. In Maryland, you have certain public universities. Like in DC, we still have those universities, but I don't know if they're robust enough in terms of like, I know that recently George Washington, there was only a handful of teachers that were coming from their education program to district classrooms. So like looking at the pipeline of teachers, I mean, I want to be very transparent in this, that I think that we'll get some pushback from the charter sector because there are just different rules, right, around this. But I think that that's something that as advocates for the public interest, we should pursue. And I think that there's also different schools that play by different rules, even in DCPS. So for instance, like Duke Ellington doesn't need to have the same criteria to be able to hire like their music and arts teachers. Like if they have, if a musician has 10 years or 15 years of professional experience, that substitutes for a traditional teacher certification. So I want to give like more schools more opportunity to hire the best staff, but also know where teachers are coming from. Because if we don't have that level of transparency, I don't think we're going to be able to address this teacher quality issue.
Great. And just one thing, Robert, I want to hear what you're saying, but when I started teaching, I was a temporary teacher. That was the standard. That was the induction standard. You had to be a temporary teacher for 2 years. And if you made it to your 3rd year, then you became a probationary teacher. And then you had a couple of years to be a probationary teacher so you could become a permanent teacher. Now, when Fenty took over, he got rid of all of that so that there are no qualifications right now for teachers. I don't think there are any for any part of our system.
No, there are. I mean,
What are they?
well, that I think that's the clarity that the report would also do. I think there's many areas of our system that don't have clarity because there's a lot of differences within the charter sectors, and DCPS also has standards, but then we're also losing so many teachers right now that they've had to adapt to
Right.
extreme
So they
circumstances.
do have them, but they don't. But not all the teachers in the system have the same qualifications initially.
Exactly. And I know one thing to look at to just flag, and then I'm curious as to kind of how we put steps in place to move this work forward. And maybe as we think about the work plan, like what form and product this could actually take, is like there's also a lot of Spanish speakers that come to DC that have training in their home countries and then aren't able to access like the certifications through Aussie. And then there are also gaps in some places that I know of with being able to hire native speakers to teach Spanish classes. So I think there's going to be like particular areas that are going to be more acutely affected than others in terms of subject areas. But I think that it's a good idea to look at the whole picture of where are teachers coming from, how are they being supported or not, and then also what are the areas and positions that are in most need, so that we can send that to council and the mayor's office so that we can plan for the future.
Yep, I agree. Robert, you got the floor.
I agree. My understanding was that we were moving towards a report that would answer those questions. So looking at all the pathways that people are taking to become teachers across sectors, and some idea of correlates with whatever those pathways are. I think it'd be interesting to see the longevity of teachers who go through different pathways and so on. So I hope that we can. Last I recall from previous meetings, we were hoping to engage someone who could do that work for us. Is that what we're still working towards?
Yeah, I think so. We want to do it. I don't know if it, um, what I don't, the difference, when we did the teacher retention survey and report and everything, which is a long report, all right, uh, we were able to get some information from the WTU. We couldn't get any information from DCPS. I mean, talking about names and numbers kind of thing, all right? Um, it seems to me that the best way to begin this is to find out information, maybe having a meeting with, like when Ben was talking about universities last year, we had a meeting with Howard and UDC's education department about teacher preparation. All right, and it gave us a lot of good information, but it wasn't down to earth information. I would really like to find out what, because I know Trinity has an education department, and so does GW, and so does Georgetown. But and we used to have at Cardozo, we had a program with GW, we had a program with Howard. I had student teachers from UDC. I had student teachers from all of those universities when I was teaching at certain points, but there isn't any universality of that. Do you
And
think, Robert, that it would be better to find? I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think it's a great idea to have someone that can pull all that information together and then bring it back to us so that we can act on it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Although, I think that you're right that whoever seeks to do that work may encounter some roadblocks, and I don't know to what extent the board can get past those roadblocks.
That's what I'm wondering too. So I think our first step, like at the working session, should be to like really share this and see if there's a whole board consensus on being able to figure out how to do this work. Because I think to both of your points, Fraser, like I think the universities are going to be the most collaborative. Like their political interest in this is it can only be strengthened in having more teachers come from their places if they have capacity. But I think trying to get DCPS to share data openly, trying to get the public charter school board to share data openly, would probably need council support, or at least the DME or OSSI support. So I think even before we try to like commission a report, like we don't have great weight, right? Like this is a governance part. To me, I see this as a governance predicament, right? Where like if we could at least ask for this information, which is part of our recommendations, right? Then we could move this work forward. But without that power that ANCs have, we can't even ask for this information. They don't have to give it to us. So I think I would propose a strategy of being able to consolidate our support with other members and hopefully get people unanimously on board, and bringing that up. And then if we do have a more consensus of the board, to then make a pitch of what we're talking about and to maybe the deputy mayor's office and to OSSI. And then if we can get their support, we'll at least know if the feasibility of getting an outside contractor to be able to do this work.
How do you feel about that, Robert?
I agree.
Okay, so I think from what I'm hearing is that we need to make a presentation in our meeting on next week as far as our report. Okay, so all right, well that's a big plate. And it's I mean it was so frustrating just trying, because we just didn't, but I mean, I feel comfortable with the new, I mean, I really felt comfortable with Christina. I thought we did a lot of stuff with Christina Grant that never was done before with the other superintendent. We never had any meetings with Hansel the whole time I was on the board until Christina Grant came on. Never had a meeting with her ever for like 3 or 4 years. 3 years, I guess. And you know, I thought we got a lot accomplished as far as the little things that we are able to do as far as standards are concerned, as far as having any push on it. And I thought that we accomplished a lot with standards in the last 2 or 3 years. And hopefully, and from my meeting with the new superintendent, I feel that she's in the same place. You know, uh, she was in high school when I first started, when I was still teaching and coaching. All right, so she's a DCPS person, uh, and but the problem that we had, especially with when Hansel was the superintendent, is that the OSSI doesn't have the authority to do a lot of things. They can't tell Farabee what to do. You know, it's a separate body. And so it may be, and I don't, you know, I'm still waiting to hear that Paul Kahn told DCPS to do something because the mayor is in charge. So like you said, we have to get buy-in from those. And I think that unless I'm reading her completely wrong, I think we have the buy-in from this new superintendent. But we have to um, present it in a way that's not inflammatory.
Yeah, and I think first things first, right, with regards to the other board members, because I would like us to be as united as possible in this task. I think DCPS has messaged that teacher turnover is not as high as it quote unquote like used to be, but it's still very high. Like we're still losing over like 30% of teachers at each charter sector or in the charter sector, and over 20 to 25% in DCPS. And that obviously varies widely in different schools across the city. So I think we need to remind other members of those numbers, and say that there has been interest from the council, because this is partly where the idea came from, to create standards for how we're supporting new teachers, and also to figure out where our teachers are coming from. And I don't think that it needs to be such a labor intensive like ask. Like we just like the ideas are pretty clear, but I think it would be useful to email all members prior to the meeting so that they have some time to kind of think about that, so it doesn't come as a surprise during new business. So that would be one thing, Fraser or Jen, if you are in agreement with that I would like to make sure that everyone's at least aware of that for next week. Because I think it'll go over better if people know about it ahead of time.
Yeah, and for us to be as clear as possible with what questions we want to answer and the purpose behind that.
That's my question as well. I think I'm hearing consensus among you all, but some of those more specific questions that I anticipate you would get from other members, which is what Robert just said.
Let me see if I can find a document that could be useful for what this looks like.
Well, we need retention figures. We need information on how many teachers we are going to have at the beginning of school, or how many we lost. Because see, the teachers are supposed to say that they're not coming back in April, right, Ben?
Yeah, I believe. And
April.
I
Now, they're
mean, in the
supposed to.
charter sector, it's even earlier, but
Okay, they're supposed to do that. All right. But that's just the supposed to do. Because if they don't do it, then that's, I don't, that's thunder in my neighborhood. I don't know if it's in yours. I don't know what happened. Um, the but the supposed to means that they could lose $1,000. All right. But now principals are finding from teachers that they're not coming back, and they got to fill those spots. But that's just one thing that we want to talk about. The teacher preparation is another thing. And for me, one of the most important things is how are teachers being helped to make it through their first couple of years by the
so
system.
exactly. And so that would be a part of this, Fraser. And I just emailed everyone. Essentially the way I'm envisioning this, sorry if I haven't been clear on this, is like the Learning Policy Institute did a study on new teacher induction and mentoring and specifically in Washington, D.C. And um, they looked at like the impact of early career mentoring and support programs on early teachers, and the teachers who get significant support or are like more than twice as likely to stay in the classroom. So
5 times as much.
yeah, so so I want to build off this work, and maybe that's how we frame it, to figure out, now that we know this, right? And we know that not all schools are getting this, how do we take stock of what type of support schools are offering, and what do we say as the standards that should be? Because we could get an example, Jen, if we look like at some of the states that have like, first year, second year teachers should be getting these supports on, you know, unit planning, classroom management, literacy instruction, whatever it may be, so that we make recommendations for to the council as to what this should look like. And I think part of that is also knowing who's in our classrooms. So knowing where teachers are coming, what preparations they're coming in with, because that's also going to dictate who needs what support.
And we need to know, like you said earlier, we need to know what guidelines each LEA has to hire somebody, because they're not the same in the charters, right?
No.
And are all the LEAs different? I mean, is there any kind of control? There isn't any control from the charter school board, right?
I'm not exactly sure, but like the report does a good job of looking at both states and cities, like just to like concretize this a little bit. Like it says that I
How
sent
long
it
is
to you.
that report? How
It's
long is it?
9 to 10 pages. I sent it to you. But for example, like Chicago Public Schools require 2 years of mentoring and 30 hours of district-wide professional learning for new teachers. LA Unified School District requires a 2-year induction program where new teachers have to meet on site with a mentor teacher for an average of 60 minutes per week.
Jesus.
So
And DCPS?
I don't think we have standards for this. We don't have standards for this.
Nothing. And we used to. That's the weird thing. We threw the baby out with the bathwater when Michelle Reed took over. Completely. When she came in and said there were no good teachers in DCPS, and then there were she had no qualifications to be in charge of a system. The superintendent used to have certain qualifications just to be a superintendent, as far as education and doctoral, or at least a master's in supervision and education. And it went out of she had 2 years of teaching experience. That was it.
Right.
And became
So
100,000 student leader.
do we feel at this point that we can message to other board member 2 or 3 goals of our work, of this proposed work?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So I think that's the next step, and then like when we meet next, we'll kind of get a sense of that. But I would just like to kind of also work as a committee to identify deliverables. So is that So can someone commit to communicating that with other board members prior to the working session?
I also think that the section of the working session where each committee chair provides a report, that typically goes pretty quickly, but you can also, I think we have built in typically several minutes for discussion as well. So you can use that time to raise it to members, and then
Well,
if
this will be the first time that we have that kind of have asked for that kind of a conversation.
Mm.
Let's put it that way, because sometimes those committee reports are just information, but this is
yeah.
what we're not doing that right now. We want to have a conversation, and we can let Ebony Rose know that that's what we're gonna do for our. This will be the first time. I think the last
I
time.
think it's worth letting everyone know. I mean, I
Mhm.
don't
Yeah,
know if there
I
are
do too.
rules.
Oh, I agree. I think
So
I want to send them that 10-page document
yeah, I think
along with
so. So
three
if you
bullets.
great. So if you or Jen could do that prior to the meeting, then like we don't need to change any structure of the working session. We'll still talk about it at the same time.
Mhm.
But I just want them to feel prepared to engage in that conversation.
Yeah, and we can we'll have it. I think we need to send it to everybody by Friday afternoon. It'd be nice to do it Thursday just because um, somebody gets an email on Friday, they're probably gonna sit on it until Monday. Um, we can also mention it at our meeting on Monday. We have a meeting on Monday.
Yes, there's well, it's a public engagement, so the members won't really be able to do business.
Well, but um, okay, but
So Jen, is that doable to you to have that done by Friday? Just, I do think it is, what, 3 bullet points of like, these are the questions we want to answer with this work. I do think it is important to add the context from the LPI paper.
Yeah, and
yeah, I agree.
these are the three that I wrote down, so let me know if you agree. Where are teachers coming from, like which programs, what support is being offered, especially during the first few years of teaching.
First few
Yeah.
years of
Okay. And then what are some examples from other states and cities? Am I missing
Yeah,
anything?
I think that's great for induction standards for
Yeah.
right,
know
and reference the report
Yes.
and encourage the members to take a look at the report because
Mhm.
it's got some fabulous information that we are lacking as a city. But I'm just saying that to y'all. I don't want to put that in the report because we want it to be as positive as possible. Because this could revolutionize teacher training.
I mean, it'll certainly have an impact. And I mean, as someone who, yeah, so I think this is a good next step. What other issues are on our agenda for today?
That's it. The research project, this is part of that conversation. The other is just what we asked people to bring. Uh, that's that's enough for. If we can get this thing moving, it'll be a lot of fun. Uh, the problem is what the problem always is recognition of a problem and then work on a solution. Because if you don't recognize the problem, if it ain't, I mean, because there's still a lot of people that think it's not broken, so there's no reason to fix it.
Mhm.
We're going to have that same problem with truancy and absenteeism Because that,
Well, that's glaring. I mean, we've made national news for our levels of chronic absenteeism. So the mayor's already, by putting forth legislation, this budget cycle has acknowledged that we need to work. I think what we do is where we're kind of at as to what's the best approach, and then how are we getting data to know whether or not we're improving and what's working and what's not working.
right. And the buy-in from the deputy mayor and OSSI is, and the board, the charter school board and DCPS is critically important.
Right.
So we have to have those as partners. We need to partner in this struggle.
It would work best if we can do that.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll have the information sent to you by maybe Friday at noon, Jen.
Yeah, I'll draft something. I'll send it to you for review and collaboration. Then you all will discuss it at the working session. Sounds like OSSI's workforce data report is coming out in the next several weeks, so we'll take time to review that as well. And I'm also going to look at this report, other research on this, and what other states are doing when it comes to these induction standards.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much. We'll
Okay.
see you all on Monday.
All right, thank you all.
All right, take
Okay.
care.
Thank you, John.